Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Reading Crossbow. My name is Lana, and I'm here with my amazing co-host, Rob.
Hey, Lana, and hello to everyone else. This is an interesting book. This is not one that I expected to have picked.
Yeah, I didn't expect you to pick this one either. We went about this on the last episode that this is actually a book I got for my daughter, which is going to lead to a lot of questions. I'm going to have to readdress that later in the show because as we start talking about this, why in the hell would I pick this for my daughter? Actually, her bookmark was still in here. She only made it to chapter 2. So I actually can now have a discussion with her about it. But yeah, so this I didn't expect this from you at all. And actually the book didn't go where I thought it was going to go anyway. So at the end, it is a Rob book.
Yeah, so part of why I picked this book is I used to really like these TV shows like Dead Like Me and Reaper, even anime like Bleach. I like that kind of Grim Reaper type of concept in stories, and I find that fascinating. And I was kind of hoping this would be the same kind of story. And yeah, it's not. It really isn't.
No, it definitely is Grim Reapery, but more on the expected Reapery and less on the grim.
Okay.
Well, some on the grim.
So, just to give you an idea of what this book is about, in roughly 2042, the internet becomes sentient. Instead of being the cloud, they now call it the Thunderhead. And the new sentient AI is basically becomes the world's benevolent dictator, ruling and the entire global population. It's essentially removed all disease, almost all suffering, and this really is a positive development. It's taking the AI superintelligence concept almost purely positively. Roughly 200 years have passed since the whole superintelligence, and in the current world, everyone's functionally immortal. There's no disease, you can de-age anytime you want and, relive the good times and, get it on with the new, fifth wife or whatever it is that excites you. But in order to keep the world from overpopulating, humans decided that they needed to cull the herd a bit. So they created an organization called Scythes. And these people have the task of randomly executing people. This is all to slow down the overpopulation of planet Earth. And the story takes place with two characters, Citra and Rowan, as they have been chosen to become apprentices to a current scythe. He's going to teach them how to do the job, and then when they graduate, it will be their job to hunt down and execute random people. How's that sound?
Sounds awful, actually. This girl basically gets a knock on her door. I pick you. I mean, it's not like they sign up for this program. There's not a sign up sheet. You just get chosen. It doesn't necessarily say how, we know how the one scythe chose her as an apprentice, but it doesn't say how the other scythes choose people as an apprentice. So
they even specifically say, like, you can't want to become a scythe. Anyone who wants it too hard, they get rejected.
Yeah. And, the early parts of this book, as you said, so like we have the thundercloud. Thundercloud's not a bad thing in this book. Actually, reading about the thundercloud, I'm like, actually, with our current political situation, Thunderhead, yeah, I might want, sure, let's get that. I'll take that over what we have, right? So then I'm like, this isn't so bad, not so bad. And the author kind of builds this up as like, it's humane. People actually kind of want to go at some point. Like, people don't want to live forever. They know when it's their time. We do this in a way that like makes sense and follows a code of ethics, and this is all okay, right? But that quickly becomes not the truth. It's not okay. So this unwraps this moral fiber within the book of like what's considered okay in a world that accepts death as something that unnaturally comes for you.
Yeah, this is a book that's trying very hard to be a thoughtful book, to make you think about ethics and life and death. And it's a very interesting story. So I guess before we get to any criticisms, though, let's talk about what was your favorite parts of this book.
Okay, so I mean, I was like kind of pulling from the cover from the get go. So this is located, just so people know, we've talked a lot about murdery things and death things, and that's what the book is. This is found in the actual YA section at Barnes and Noble. This is next to all the cutesy little YA fantasies. The other side of the shelf, at least in my bookstore, is manga. Like it's very cutesy. This is marketed to young teenagers. I picked this up off the shelf for young teenagers, right? So I was drawn to this because it's one of those, if we can kind of zoom in on this real quick, just the art alone is kind of one of those, what do you see first kind of pictures, right? They don't actually draw the face of the character in. And I thought that was a unique play on art. And they do this in the next book too. So it's just kind of fun. And also anytime something has like this, like, prize on it, this takes me back to like middle school, and like all of our books had these right? And so like, yeah, it was very much marketed to YA. I was super excited about it. I liked that this was a teenager story. Actually, I liked it from the perspective of like death is just very much accepted, and that so much so that, yeah, like we could just pick up two 16-year-olds off the street and like, recruit them into our murder society. It sounds terrible to say, Rob. I don't know if there's a way that we can describe this that's going to make people go like, yeah, I want to pick up that book. But it's interesting. Like it has Giver vibes. So I'm just going to say that from the beginning. If our readers have read The Giver, it's a common book to be assigned in middle school. I was assigned it. My kids were assigned it. It's actually one of my daughter's favorite books, which is why I thought this would be okay for her. And The Giver follows teenagers too in a society that basically tells you what you're going to be. Some women become mothers, right? Some people are put into like medical roles and such. And like this boy gets to be the giver. So basically the keeper of knowledge. He's given knowledge from the current giver. So leaving it at that, if you're used to that style of book, this will be fun for you. It's written very much in the style of The Giver. That's great. That's one of the things I really enjoyed about it. It's also very young. We get death from youthful perspective, which I think makes it seem less scary.
Okay. Yeah, this is what I found to be kind of the most interesting part of this story for me. What I liked the most was, funny enough, the brutality of it. So during this book, we really get to see the philosophies of several different scythes. One tries to choose the most random thing possible. That's how he chooses his victims. Another one tries to choose people that maybe look like they're just done. Because you can't ask to be gleaned. Gleaned is the euphemism for being murdered. You can't ask for that. If you ask, they will refuse to do it. And you can't harm yourself. You can't crash your car or jump off a building, because if you do, they just wake you back up a few days later in a, rejuvenation center. The only people who can permanently kill you is a scythe. And basically what happens is when a scythe kills someone, the thunderhead will refuse to wake them up, revive them. That's really that's the whole technology. You just won't be allowed to be revived. Now, the third type of scythe, though, is the homicidal maniac. And I felt his story actually was the most interesting part of this book, because he has a very different worldview from the rest of the book, because he wants to do mass murders. All of his killings are done in big groups. He chooses a plane or he chooses a building. He's like, we're going to get everyone in there. And he has a team of scythes who all go in with him, and they buddy cop this murder spree. Now, it's not the fact that I like that. It's that there seemed like a hidden story that was happening. Because each time he does that, you actually get this little hint of, these might not be random. And I found that to be my favorite part. I was trying to figure out the mystery. Like, he chooses this office building, but right before he chooses the office building, you learn a little bit about someone who works there and what they do there. And I was like, ooh. And then he goes in and kills the whole building, and then they do it on an airplane. And I was like, there is a method behind this madness. And I was really excited to learn what that was.
Yeah, and that actually brings up like something that we haven't covered yet, which is important to bring up. And one of the things I liked about this book is one of the reasons I picked it for my daughters, we asked the person at Barnes & Noble like about dystopian books. And it's interesting that they brought us to this one because this is very much a utopian society, right? We've hit the pinnacle of all things humans can do. They even joke. There's actually a lot of kind of joking about things in this book about they kind of laugh. It's almost comical where humans have evolved because they have jobs now, but they don't really need them. And like one of the characters' moms does like food generation, like science, but like they've already made the best food and they know that. So it's all an act. People are going to work just because now. People are getting married, but they know it's not going to be the love of their life because they're going to live for like hundreds of years. And the odds of someone getting gleaned is like 1%, I believe, or less than 1%. So functionally, as you said, the Thunderhead cannot interfere with Scythe affairs. So the Scythe is, in its own sense, its own society. And then we have within the book another society as well that's operating on the fringes. So we have the main utopian society, we have the Scythe society, and then something else I'm not going to bring up, but we know it's going to be a factor maybe in future novels. And then what we're seeing, and I was wondering, why did they offer this as a dystopian novel? Because what we're seeing in the book is on the edge of dystopian. We have this perfect society, but it's about to fracture. So the book is actually more about that. Like that's about to happen. And we see this in some areas where the Thunderhead maybe wants to cross a line, but doesn't. It's not supposed to interfere, but it also knows what's happening is bad. And then we have this system that's been in place for now, I think you said 200 years that they've been gleaning, and it works. And it was founded on more morally sound principles and ethical, well, not ethical. I don't know. I don't even know how to describe that. Like, good ways to get rid of people because its population is too high. Then you have someone that comes in and kind of wants to wreck that. And that's where this is about to fall apart. But I also wanted to point out for our viewers, most of the Scythes do this based on stats too, because the Thunderhead knows like stats of back in the mortal world, how people died. So it's kind of, again, this is the almost comic sense of it. Like, well, you're going to drown by rescuing a dog today because back in the day, X amount of people died that way. Oh, you're going to die by, getting stabbed in a parking lot. So they actually try to mimic the way death happened. So this side that you're talking about, he's like, well, I'm going to pick the more interesting ones because, 300 people back in the day used to die by a plane crash. So let's just go murder 300 people on a plane. So it's almost like a parody at times too.
Yeah, there is a very strong like gallows humor throughout this story because in order to cope, like the people do have these Scythes do have to like find ways to cope with the fact that they have to kill essentially 5 people a week.
Yeah.
Like on average. So like one of the characters jokes like he gets weekends off. But, killing 5 people a week, that's going to add up. And at least in the case of Scythe Goddard, he basically came up with the idea. He's like, maybe I just kill people 1 day a month.
Yeah.
I'm just going to just
take care the rest of the time.
I'm just going to take care of it 1 day a month or 1 day a quarter, and we'll just deal with it that way. And so these differing philosophies for killing, I found to be very interesting. And like I said, I felt like there was actually a secret story or a hinted at story that was being told with Goddard's selection of victims. So yeah, was there anything you also liked?
Yeah, so I mean, all of that, like utopian into dystopian, like I said, like this is going to fracture. That's what this whole thing's. I loved that. I loved the interaction of the 2 main characters, even with their friends in the build-up, how they got selected, how we see their true character, and why the Scythe selected them. The very early parts of this book is probably one of the most intriguing. And then you said, as we get into training of the Scythes, that was super, super interesting. Not what I expected, because I was hoping this would be more like maybe quick injection, maybe something more simple like in The Giver. They also prune population in The Giver as well. That's one of the dad's jobs in that story. It's like a horrible job. He does it on infants. He prunes, like if it's one's not like, anyway, I won't go into The Giver too much, but I expected it to be more like that. So the fact that they train to basically get rid of people in all sorts of horrible ways. I mean, they train with axes, they train with scythes, although they never use the scythe, but there's like one hanging on the wall in the weapons room, and he points that out. And so we know this might be significant at some point, because it's like, oh yeah, that one, I actually haven't used that one yet, right? And so it's just like, it's icky. I don't know. I expected, because we're in this utopian world, we have this thunderhead, we have everything supposed to be like nice and clean and, humane. It's brutal. The killings are actually brutal. Even the nice size, instead of just like quickly, humanely easing their pain, which they can do, it's available. The science is there. They have pills that can do this painlessly, right? They choose to like knife people or shoot people. And that's because they're trying to take people out in the way that they did in mortal times. Like I said, gunshots, things like that. I didn't expect that. That was off for me. I enjoyed it though. It made sense. I guess I would just say this book feels like somebody took all the holes that could have possibly been holes, with the exception of a few that will go into criticisms, and figured them out. I just didn't see a lot to unravel here. It all made sense. The author had a reason for everything, and that felt good to read something like that.
Good. I think I especially liked the way you really got to learn about the different philosophies of these different scythes. It was really trying hard to like try to give you something to think about. And I like that in a book. It's one of my favorite parts of like Starship Troopers, was actually the classroom scenes at the very beginning. Not the movies, but the book.
Okay, I was like, wait.
But in the book, you get a lot more of this learning, where they do a lot more, talking about like philosophy and that kind of stuff, and whether or not you agree with what these characters are each talking about. In this book, you get multiple very different points of view. It gives you something to think about, and I like that. They're trying to give you something beyond the book, so I applaud the ambition of that.
Yeah, very thought-provoking. If you're looking for a thought-provoking read, which I never look for, as you all know, I want to be entertained. Entertain me. I don't want to have to think about things. I don't want that at all. I did not. And unexpected. Still liked it, but I'm like, oh shoot, they're making me care and feel and think and shit. Damn it. If you love that, this book is great. This is great for that type of reader who wants to feel, wants to think about things. Maybe you shut the chapter after one and you're like, oh shoot, let's ponder. If you're a journaler, if you like to journal your books, I know a lot of people do, this is absolutely the book for you.
So what about criticism? Where did this book fall flat for you?
It's part of just not expecting it. I just thought it would be cleaner. I don't know what I was expecting. Angels of Mercy. I don't know. I just thought the size would just be sweet. I don't know. I guess I just didn't expect the blood and the gore. There is a lot of that. That is a trigger warning for some of our viewers. You're going to get a ton of that. Where I feel like it fell flat for me was just being a bit preachy. Looking back at like being in school and like thinking like, oh, what are they assigning this week? What am I going to have to compare? What does this symbolize? Like, I just felt like I was in school again. And actually we talked about this a bit before recording our episode, that your copy and my copy is different. I have the paperback, because like I said, I got it for my daughter. And I have a reader's guide in the back that asks thought-provoking questions, that asks questions you would have got on a school assignment. And I didn't expect that. So that is a downside for me, is like, I wanted to be entertained. It's not a bad thing. The book's fantastic. I am going to say that. The book is great, thought-provoking the whole time. I just didn't want that at the time.
Okay. Yeah, I have the hardback version of it, and it does not have that reader's guide at all. It's just the book.
Yeah, so it came across preachy with maybe not meaning to. I'm not sure. But there's also the side of like, just me as like a human and a mom, I recommended this for my daughter. So we actually, I still kept her her little marker in here where she's at. So she didn't get to anything that was like too crazy. She did get to the first gleaning, so that happened. And she did get to, you know, a character having to go through that. But so we had to talk about it. Like, is this something that you're going to want to read? Let's talk about the things that kind of happen without spoiling it. Is this going to be okay for you? And she was like, Mom, I loved The Giver. I loved that. I read through the difficult scene in that book. If you guys read it, you know which one it is. And she's like, I can handle this. I think it's interesting. I don't know that she can. I don't know, after reading this, and this is a criticism, that this should be in the 12 to 13-year-old section. I do think my child can handle it, personally. Do I recommend this for other children? No.
Okay. I think my biggest criticism is I felt like this book is just really too slow. I actually found the book to be really boring at times. And I struggled to read this book because there's so much times where they're just like, so this book is, like many of our other ones, is told from the point of view of two characters. So this is almost entirely internal monologue. They're just thinking about the situation and what they're learning. But so much of this book, they just talk about things, and rather than doing. This is very much, it felt like a tell, don't show, until it actually shows, and then you get like the mass murders. And that's why I think I liked those scenes more, because actually something was happening. It wasn't this slow, ponderous tale. Something was actually happening, and I think that's why I like those chapters more. So I think my biggest criticism on this book is it might be too slow for some people.
Yeah, it is pretty slow. And I would say, like, this is a YA book. So we haven't really talked about this, but there's love interest in here. There's a budding romance in here. And it's so few and far apart. And that does feel appropriate for YA. But even for my own daughter reading this, she's going to want a little bit more. Like, I know her. She's going to want to be like, but Mom, when's the cute boy scene coming next? And it's just not there. And we actually have two love stories in here. And it's nice, right? It's sweet the way it's written out. But like, it just was not captivating enough on the levels outside, like the human building levels, right? So we have some friendships. Like, a fun one to bring up actually is a friend of one of the apprentices. He splats all the time. So that is like when you just, you just jump off a building and you become something called deadish. That's another way they bring humor into the book. And, he's always going to visit his friend in the hospital who just splatted, right? Because he's bored. And like, it built up these fun moments in the story, but then it didn't really continue them. Like, I just when I felt like we're getting connections between characters, it would get slow again. And it didn't have enough of that. So I agree with you. I also I should bring up, and I'll just say this quickly. I mentioned earlier about it not recommending it for 12 or 13-year-olds. I should say before someone gets in the comments, I am not on the banning book group here. Like, I think books should be available to everyone. I'm just saying, warning you, if you're choosing to recommend it for your kid, that you take a moment to read about it and understand it, educate first. That's all. So anyone can pick it up.
Okay. My other criticism is I struggled with the actual purpose of the gleaning. I mean, I get it, but I don't think the book really sold the value there. They're killing so very few people. Like, there's just not that many scythes. They kill 250 or so a year. Each one is responsible to kill 250 people a year. I mean, we're talking about hundreds of years in the future. In fact, when I said 200 years, that's a guess. They don't actually know, because they stopped numbering years because it just made people feel old. So they just started calling it's the year of the cobra, it's the year of the bat, it's the year of the mongoose, and so on.
Capybara. Yeah, they had some weird ones.
Yeah, the current year is like the year of the capybara. Or maybe that's the next year. But either way, so they don't actually know how old some people are. Some people have completely forgotten how old they are. And I think it's never really explained why they have to do this. And why do they have to do it in the most brutal way possible? I have a theory, but the book doesn't actually give you a good reason. It's just,
Yeah.
we're just, so like my theory would be as simple as you need to do this to that mortality of humans is what drives us forward. It's what causes progress and not stagnation. But they're not killing nearly enough people to even worry about, or I don't know. The book just didn't really sell me on the idea of this world. This world doesn't quite make sense to me. And I feel bad about that because I feel like I should have. And maybe I missed something.
I think the book is supposed to make you feel that way, at least for the first one. I think it's building up to bringing back human emotion, because it does mention human emotion in some ways gone. Like I said, love for someone. Like, you might actually fall in love with your first husband, but you're going to live so long that you're just going to go through, at some point you just naturally divorce and you're like, I want a new wife now, right? So love doesn't feel the same. They're walking through a museum at one point and they're looking at what they call mortal art. So there's mortal art and there's post-mortal art. And we're talking about like these teens who are going to become Scythes are looking at like a woman holding her dying husband in her arms, and she's like dying inside herself, right? She's just like, he's gone, right? They don't know that. They don't understand it. And one of the students is walking past it and he's like, I wonder what it would be like to feel like that, to love someone that much, to miss someone when they're gone, we don't know what this feels like. And so that's part of the reason why I think they glean in the way they do, is to give some shock, anger, surprise. Like when one of the Scythes takes someone out, she looks in their eyes the whole time first, and she registers that they're getting that feeling, that surprise emotion. And I think that feeling is building up to book 2. And I think this fall that I'm predicting, I mean, I don't know, I haven't read the next books, but I know we're moving into possibly dystopian, especially with seeing the Scythes society start to fall apart with these different ways of thinking. And then this other group that we haven't talked about, which I think is going to have an impact on what new world might be. But we're building up to this all falling apart, I think.
And I think, like I said, I just felt like it just wasn't, they didn't really lock it down. And I mentioned earlier, one of my favorite parts was the fact that you got to see this kind of side story about what Goddard is doing and why it seems like he actually has a motive that he's doing. And then by the time the end of the book comes, it's like, does it even matter anymore? Like, it's a story beat that went nowhere. And that was and that was the thing I latched onto the most. Was a story beat that seemingly went nowhere. And that's where I felt like I didn't connect with this book at all.
Huh. Yeah, I feel the opposite. It was slow. I mean, I feel like I was not wanting this, right? My life's complicated enough. It's the same reason I don't generally watch dramas. I don't generally watch something where afterwards you're like, wasn't that such a great movie? No, I'm not picking that shit, especially if I'm paying that much money to go into a theater. I want to be entertained. I want to laugh. I want something like that. I'm getting away from the world when I'm reading it, and I don't want the world at my shoulders. And this is very much that. Like, I don't want to think about killing. I don't want to think about the world and what's moral and what's right, what's wrong. If we live forever, that's scary stuff to read. But it was good. At least I thought it was good. Okay. I like Goddard too, because he's questioning. He's basically doing what we're doing, which is, why are they doing this? Why the gleaning? Why in this way? He's also the same thing. He's like, this is stupid. I'm just going to murder 300 on one day and party the rest of the time. Like you said, I think it is going somewhere. I just don't think it went somewhere here in this book. And maybe the build-up's too slow.
Yeah. And maybe the payoff is later. So I'm not going to discount that as being possible, but let's review this book. This is, I suspect we're going to have different reviews.
Now you do. Now some of the last things I've said.
So what did you feel about this book? Were you happy we read it?
I am happy we read it, for the same reason I'm happy I watched movies like Saving Private Ryan. Like, it's hard to recommend to other people. People have to be in the right mood for it. Is Saving Private Ryan a great movie, or Forrest Gump, or things like that? Yeah, they're great, but there's killing and war and sad and questionable people with moral issues. That's what this book is. If you like that, if you like thought-provoking books, this is a book for you. It's just hard to rate on our scale, because if I was rating this among our fantasy books, like if we're looking at the books we read last year, it doesn't fit. And I thought that maybe this was going to fit. It just doesn't. If I had to rank this on like fantasy or even sci-fi, I know it's in the future, it just didn't, is it weird that it didn't feel very sci-fi? I would rank this low in the fantasy genre or the sci-fi genre. Okay. I'm gonna rank it high in just for the novel that it is. So I had my issues with it. I discussed those issues. It was a very thought-provoking book. It was super interesting. Like I said, it explains everything. It explains why they choose people the way they do. The training process for these apprentices and the testing that they have to go through is very unique. And the book itself was unique, and even the Scythedom, like you just talked about just a little bit at the end with how the world's changed, is looked at in a way of, it's very different per region, like Latin America versus like what we would think of as like Europe. They all have different ways, like the middle and western regions, that they approach how they do the Scythedom, and some are more traditional, some are more modern. And so I think this book is gonna expand a bit as we get into that. We got into it a little bit this time. So anyway, I'm rambling a bit, but what I'm trying to say is that it is very thought-provoking. It is very interesting. If you're ready for that, this book is a solid 4 for me. I think some people would even give it a 5 based on some of the reviews I've seen and based on the awards that it has been given. This is definitely a book that I see in, a school curriculum. Probably even one that they maybe even read in colleges, despite YA. Like I could see this on a literature classes book list. It's a 4. It's a strong 4 for me.
Yeah, I definitely can see this is the kind of book you would add to a school curriculum, up there with like, Lord of the Flies and Animal Farm, yes, that kind of stuff. Yep, it definitely has all those elements. But as an adult reader, this book really just didn't land well for me. I'm just the wrong audience, I think. Despite the fact that like I said, the parts that you liked the least were the parts I liked the most. And I find that actually to be kind of interesting. But my initial thought was I was actually going to go with a 2. But I do like the ambitious tone. Like it's trying to convey these philosophical ideas that they're not even saying these are right or wrong necessarily. They're just different ideas for accomplishing the same thing. Goddard might be bad for like where he runs into a church with a flamethrower. Well, actually, it's one of his followers that's the flamethrower.
Yeah, that happens.
But and in doing it with glee. But if you look at the other sides, they're just as brutally killing people. So is he really that much worse? I think the philosophical questions are very interesting. It's just not the story I was looking for. So I'm going to go with the 3. I think that's a good rating.
It's fair. This is a hard one to rate. I mean, I can just say that I'm so glad you didn't recommend this book like right before I took my vacation to Europe last summer. Like I can only imagine like being in Italy and like on the beach and like, oh my gosh, right? I'm actually glad this happened at the time that it did, because I was actually kind of ready to read it right now. This is heavy. It's just a heavy book, and we didn't talk about all the triggers, but there's suicide in many ways, not just the fun comical way of what they call the splat and you're just kind of dead-ish and they bring you back and you get ice cream because that happens. It's so silly, but it is very, very heavy, and there's even murdering children. So be ready for this book. Lots and lots and lots of trigger warnings. If you can accept that, and if you can mentally prepare for what this book has in store for you, it is an excellent time, I think, if you want to question and like think about things a little bit deeper. It is not a fun read.
All right. So that's it for our book reviews for January. But for February, we've already gotten Lana's preview of her book. My book, because the last two books I've selected were both kind of YA sci-fi, I kind of felt like I needed to go back to my roots a bit. And
Uh-oh.
we're going to go with Mark Lawrence.
Oh.
But
did I know this? Is that on our list, Rob? Did you sneak this one in here?
it's on there.
Okay.
So the book I selected for us to read is called Red Sister. So this is not the Prince of Thorns series. This is one that I've never read. So, and the main character it's a female-led story. And I'm excited. I want we need some more grimdark.
Oh boy. I was going to say, so I enjoyed Mark Lawrence as an author very much. And you guys might remember that if you've stuck with us for a while. Also, please subscribe, calling that right now, because if you subscribe, you get notifications when we talk about cool things like this. But we've covered Mark Lawrence before, so I hope you've been here long enough to know that. And despite not giving that book a very high rating, he was an incredible author. One of the best authors, I think, that I rated last year.
Yeah.
So I'm excited.
And that book series, The Library, I've been continuing to read, and I've just been loving that series, and I'm looking forward to the finale. But yeah, we definitely need some more grimdark. No more of this sci-fi YA.
This was dark, Rob. Okay, whatever. You know what? If you're gonna give me grimdark, it better be grimdark and entertaining. Okay? We need it. We need a bit more here. Some action. Some, I don't know. Red Sister. You said there's a female heroine in this. Okay, I can get on board.
So be sure to like and subscribe. We're reading 2 books a month. It's an easy thing to read along with us. And then the extra weeks of the month, we're trying to produce original content. Sometimes it's going to be just one of us. Sometimes it might be both of us. But we're trying to add some additional episodes to give you more to think about.
Yeah, tune in. We're covering all sorts of things. Comics, YA, predictions, books I've read in the past, books Robert's read. We cover all things books-related sci-fi fantasy. All right, so we'll see you next time.
Thank you.